Hello and welcome to Unify's webinar on joining the .NET family, which is all about our Team Developer 6, in particular the .NET capabilities that will be available with the Team Developer 6 .NET add-on. I'm your host, Matt Brunquell. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items. For those of you new to Unify, we're a publicly traded software company that's been in business for over 30 years. And we're known for being the first to deliver a relational database in the Unix environment. And since then, we've delivered development software products that run across different databases and platforms, really geared towards building and modernizing business applications, and geared towards the business application developer who places a premium on productivity over low-level coding. Today, our business has expanded beyond the database and development products into migration solutions, as well as archiving for both structured and unstructured information, whether it be reports, email, and even into e-discovery. Now, we encourage questions on the webinar, and the way you do that is to use the Q&A button on your WebEx toolbar. And we have a lot of people on today, so it's going to be easier for Anna and I if you post your questions just through the Q&A. That's the button with the question mark, as opposed to the chat. I know some people like to use the chat, but we're probably going to have a lot of questions on this topic today, and Anna, Paula, and I want to get through as many of them as we can. So I mentioned Anna Paula. That's today's presenter, and Anna is our Director of Technical Support worldwide, and she's been with Unify for over 12 years in various technical roles, including support, consulting, pre-sales, and she spent a lot of time working with Team Developer customers since 1.1.2. So she has seen it all when it comes to Team Developer. She actually helped open our office in Brazil. She was the first technical resource to staff our Brazil office. And she's, though, coming to you today from our headquarters in Roseville, California. So it's really it's a great opportunity and a real treat to have someone with her background and experience on Team Developer who's worked on the customer projects from all the way back in these old versions, helping them through their migrations into the 5X. She's going to be helping them a lot in the 6 as well. In fact, she'll be running the alpha and beta programs for Team Developer 6. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Anna to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Matt. Hello, everyone. And we have a big agenda to cover today. We're going to see some demos on Team Developer 6.0, so I'll go ahead and get started. We're going to talk a little bit about our architecture overview for Team Developer 6. We'll learn about the new IL compiler that we have introduced brand new to Team Developer 6.0. And I'm going to do a few demos on compiling an application created with TD Native into .NET WPF Desktop and .NET WPF XBAP, which is the application running on a browser. We'll learn about customizing XAML, which is the graphical part of your application when you're going to one of those two WPF compile modes. And we'll talk about debugging as well. So using .NET with Team Developer 6.0, there's two methods for using .NET with this new version of TD. The first method is the one that allows you to compile directly to .NET using the brand new IL compiler and .NET class libraries. The second method is calling existing .NET libraries, existing .NET assemblies using the new .NET Explorer wizard. So it's important to understand that with Team Developer TD 6.0, you're going to be able to generate .NET code based on our compilation options using the IL compiler, which has been introduced to TD 6.0, but you're also going to be able to import .NET libraries into your current application using the TD native option. So let's talk a little bit about our architecture and the build options in Team Developer 6.0. So the way this is going to work is you as a customer, you're going to be able to migrate from any application starting in TD1X up to 5.2. You're going to be able to migrate those applications into Team Developer 6.0. Now, it's very important to note here that we do have a set of steps to migrate applications up to Team Developer 5.2 to upgrade your outline to Unicode mode. So if you're already in TD 5.1 or 5.2, you're ready to go with TD 6.0. You're going to be able to open your application, compile, and run. Now, if you're using an old version like TD1 or versions up to 4.2, you're going to have to follow the steps to migrate your code to Unicode. So is it mandatory that you do that? No, you can go straight to TD 6.0, but you have to be aware that there are steps involved to migrate to Unicode. So you can find all that information right now. You don't have to wait for TD 6.0 to be available. You can start migrating your applications right now. We have webinars on how to do that, etc. So let's say you migrated your application, you opened it in TD 6.0. You're going to have several ways of deploying this application. The first one is standard TD desktop application. This is TD as you know now. This is a Team Developer running on Win32 mode. Now in TD 6.0, we introduced the new compiler, which will allow you to create and compile applications that will use the .NET framework. For this new compiler, you will be able to compile your application in 5 different modes, as you can see. So you will be able to compile your application to the .NET framework using WinForm desktop applications. You'll be able to select a different compilation option to generate a .NET class library, a different option to create a .NET web service, or WPF desktop or WPF browser. For WPF desktop and browser, we require .NET Framework 3.5. For all the others, you can use .NET Framework 2.0. So again, with TD 6.0, 6 different methods of deploying your application. 1, Win32 standard desktop, and 5 new methods for the .NET world. So what we've done in Team Developer to allow those different compilation methods was to create new build target options. So now when you go into TD 6.0 and you choose to build your application executable, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different methods on top of the Win32 native. WinForm, .NET libraries, WPF desktop, XBAP, which is the browser, and .NET web service. So those are new build target options into Team Developer 6.0. And as you can see, it's just a new set of radio buttons into your build settings, your existing build settings screen. So on this side, you have all the Win32 application compilation options as before. You have your standard exe, dynalibs, include libraries, com, etc. Now, if you choose to compile into the .NET world, you're going to see different compilation methods, WinForm, desktop, browser, library, and .NET service. So it's one single click. It's one different compilation method under your build settings screen. So talking specifically about .NET now, forgetting a little bit about the Win32 native TD world. All .NET languages compile into Microsoft Intermediate Language, which is also known as IL. This is also what we're going to use into TD 6.0. So IL is a low-level bytecode, one step above machine code, which is then compiled into executables by the .NET Common Language Runtime. This is totally new for TD 6.0. It's a brand new compiler, and it's separate from the existing Win32 compiler. So this is going to take place automatically. You don't have to worry about it as a developer. As soon as you choose to compile as one of the 5.NET options, you're going to get this compiler running into TD 6.0 for you. All compiled code is pure .NET, assembled from the generated IL. New WPF class libraries are used, and those libraries are internal TD6 libraries based on proven Sabertooth libraries. So Sabertooth is the technology that we use behind this .NET WPF code generation. And we also have a new debugger based on Microsoft's own debugger library. We're going to talk a little bit more about the debugger later on this presentation. So just a summary of what we just discussed. So into Team Developer 6.0, into the same IDE, we're going to have a new Team Developer IL compiler, which will allow you to compile into the 5 different methods for .NET, which we talked about before. And we're going to have a new TDIL debugger, which will generate all the .NET class libraries from Team Developer. And again, this is separate from the existing Win32 TD native. It's all brand new, even though it's transparent for the developer because it's automatically included into the IDE. This compiler is developed in C#. We are going to support all existing language keywords and statement types. So you will code in Sol and compile in Sol as you do right now, independent of the method that you choose to compile your application into. The same Sol types will continue to be used, and support for Windows classes and multiple inheritance are also supported with this new IL compiler. As I said before, this compiler is fully integrated into the existing Team Developer IDE, so it's transparent. You don't have to do anything different. It's the same development interface for you as a developer. Performance equal or faster than the existing Win32 compiler. No change to the graphical environment at all. And all warnings and errors are displayed using the existing output window. So we're making it really easier for you as a developer to develop, code your application into Team Developer 6.0, and the only thing you have to worry about is compile into a different method if you want .NET. The new TD.NET class libraries, all native Sol control types and 90% of the Sol functions are implemented. This number can change. This can be higher, can be lower. We talk about 90% because functions that have been deprecated, for instance, Sol, DDE, etc., we are not going to support them, especially because the .NET world doesn't understand this type of functionality anymore. Reporting based on a new ActiveX report builder engine. So we're going to have in TD 6.0 the ability to call and customize your reports using an ActiveX report builder engine that's going to be available in 6.0. It's an enhancement to the existing ActiveX report builder engine, but it's fully compatible with the .NET world, and runtime performance comparable to native Sol. So you shouldn't see any difference in terms of compilation or executing your application when using those new .NET class libraries. Database connectivity. We are introducing a new robust database connectivity for the .NET world. We're going to support ODBC, OLEDB, and .NET Data Provider. For now, we have SQL-based, Oracle, and SQL Server as our primary .NET Data Provider databases. We are obviously going to support the other major players for database as well. We're going to use an approach similar to the SQL.ini. So you're going to configure your database connectivity in a way that you know already in TD previous versions. We're going to support use of binds and intos embedded into SQL. So during runtime, we're going to take care of it for you. So important to know here is that you're not going to have to change any of your SQL statements, use of bind variables, intos that you have right now. What we have new in Team Developer 6.0.NET is a new data service driver, which will allow multiple clients to share one single database connection. And this server component uses Microsoft technology WCF embedded into our database server driver. Okay, so let's talk about the compilation options. And as I mentioned before, today we're going to talk about compiling to .NET WPF Desktop and WPF Browser. This is the first in a series of TD 6.0 webinars, so we're going to have other webinars which will detail even more the different compilation options, other objects that we are introducing in TD 6.0, etc. So today we're going to focus on two specific compilation methods for WPF. So as I said before, we have a new target option into the build settings dialog, which is the .NET WPF Desktop. And the compiled output for this target option is an executable. It's a .exe WPF executable, but it's a .NET, pure .NET executable. For each form that you create in the application, you're also going to have a XAML file as an output for this compiled .NET WPF. We're going to have an app.xaml file. This is the large file which describes all your application resources. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later. And you're going to have a XAML file created for the start form. This is the first form that your end user is going to see when he starts the application, and it's called window main.xaml. All this is generated as a compiled output for the .NET WPF Desktop target option. These files, the XAML files, can be located into a .xaml subfolder of the applications folder. Supports TD theme settings. So for instance, if you have an application using Luna Blue from TD 5.2 or Obsidian, when you migrate that application to 6.0, you can continue to use the same theme if you choose to compile into a WPF desktop output. And you can run and debug as usual from the IDE. So let's go ahead and take a look at Team Developer 6.0. I'm going to open TD 6.0 here. It's actually already opened. And I have an application actually created in Team Developer 5.2. It's called the DevCon Island Demo APT. And this application uses dialogues, uses MDI forms, and it uses most of our newly introduced objects. Oh, just ignore this message. It uses all our new introduced objects for Team Developer 5.2, like the grid, like the tab, the new tab bar, etc. It's going to use the new date and date timer, daytime pickers. It's going to use the new tab controls, etc. So it's important to know that everything that we've introduced up to 5.2 in terms of new graphical objects are going to be supported in Team Developer 6.0 as well, running not only as a WPF desktop, but also as an application running in the browser. So I've opened this application. The only thing I have to do is go into my project build settings, and here, instead of using a Win32 type of application, I chose the .NET application, and I chose .NET WPF desktop. So let's go ahead, compile, and run this application. Okay. Again, just ignore it. As you can see, I'm using the new compiler. It showed compiling IL application, and it's going to open the application running as a WPF browser. So you'll be able to see here I'm using the new splash screen for Team Developer 6.0, so showing that it's running in 6.0 already. And you can see that it looks very much like an application created in 5.2 using all the new objects. Like, for instance, here I'm using the new ribbon bar, with images included in this ribbon bar. I can navigate through this menu. I have a grid in my main MDI form, and I have images, and I can zoom into those images exactly like I did in Team Developer 5.2. I can click on the header of a cell, and I can order the grid by this specific cell. Here, if I click one of my cells into the grid uses a push button as the cell type, so I can click this push button and I'll open a dialog into my MDI form, which uses the new tab control, and I can navigate through this tab bar, and I'm even using the new daytime picker, etc. But again, keep in mind that this is all .NET generated. In this case, all the classes, everything that I'm using is pure .NET. But it looks very much like an application developed in Win32, Team Developer 5.2, for instance. And I can even select different themes, so my application looks exactly the same as before. So I'm going to close this application now so we can continue the presentation. So I'll go back to my presentation. And we can go on talking about the output generated from this app. So as I mentioned before, XAML files are created for each of those forms and objects in my application. So in TD 6.0, what we can do is customize these XAML files to make our application look very beautiful, very modern, look exactly like we want, because everything in a XAML file can be customized, and this is independent of the business logic of my application. So this is a very easy way to modernize and customize your graphical interface using the XAML files generated behind the scenes when you compile into .NET WPF. So the compiler-generated XAML resides in a .xaml subfolder, as I mentioned before. If you customize your XAML, and we're going to see how to do this from TD, a customized XAML file may be placed into a .xaml_c subfolder and will be picked up by the compiler and used instead. Form outline items will have new XAML context menu with options to view default XAML or create custom XAML. we're going to see how to do that. What I'm saying here is that for objects in your application, we are giving you the option to right-click on top of that object, select Edit XAML, and you can do everything you want. You can change push button colors. You can make your push button spin. You can create a very, very modern grid, changing colors, etc. It's a very powerful way of modernizing your application just by customizing these simple files. Team Developer will ship with basic XAML editor. So we chose one very basic editor for XAML called XAML, and it's going to be integrated into Team Developer 6.0. This editor is launchable from TD, as I mentioned before, by right-clicking on your object and selecting Customizing XAML. And you can change it. You can change this default XAML editor and configure it into your team developer preferences to the editor that you choose. So you don't have to use XAML. You can use whatever you have. There are tons available as third-party tools, tons available on the internet, and you can choose the XAML editor that you want to use. So there you go. Under Preferences from TD, you just change from XAML to whatever you want. You can use another editor for editing the XAML files, and this will be launched from TD instead. I also talked about a big file called app.xaml that may be edited in this case to enable application-wide changes. So let's say you want to apply custom themes to all forms in your application, or you want to apply custom style to certain specific controls. You can use the application general XAML file to make those changes all in once. So let's take a look. I'll go ahead to Team Developer and I'll quickly make a change to one of my forms. And the idea here, I'm not a XAML expert. I don't plan to be because I'm a TD developer. I want to focus on my application development and business logic instead. So what I can do is give the XAML files to a web designer, for instance, and tell them, go ahead, make my application look exactly like this design here, make it look really modern, etc. And this is because this is totally separated from your business logic. That person can edit that XAML files for you, and you can then compile them into your application. So let's go ahead and quickly here, just as a demo way of showing how easy it is to edit a XAML file. Right now, I'm selecting my dialog in DLG invoices. I'll right-click and I'll select the new option under the context menu called Custom XAML. And I'm going to edit this XAML file for this dialog box. So at this moment, TD6.0 is opening the XAML editor, and as you can see, it has a top and a bottom part. The top one shows the layout of my form, and the bottom is where I can edit the XAML code to make the changes and apply the changes that I want. So here, for instance, I want to do a simple change. I'll go ahead, I'll scroll down to my push button, insert invoice, and I'm going to change the background color to red. As you can see, my top side of the editor is already making the changes for me. So it's already done. I can see my push button, new invoice in red color now. So I'll go ahead, do a file, save. I'll close this. I'll compile again into .NET WPF Desktop. It's using the new IL compiler. As you can see, it generated my .NET classes, and it's going to open the application now. Again, this is running as a desktop application. We're going to talk about the browser next. So it's opening the same application as before. Now if I click the push button into my grid to see my dialog invoice, it has my push button color changed to red. So as simple as that, and like I said, customizing XAML, you can find videos on the internet. It's very, very powerful. You can do anything you want with your application in terms of graphical interface. So this is built into Team Developer 6.0 now. Okay, I'll go back to my PowerPoint presentation, and we are going to talk about compiling into WPF XBAP. You compile into WPF XBAP when you want to run your application into the browser. So again, the only thing you have to do is to change the target build in Build Settings dialog to WPF browser. The output is the same as the WPF desktop plus two files. One, which is the manifest file for your application, where all the dependencies are going to be defined, and one file called your application name.xbap. This is the deployment manifest. This is the file that you're going to deploy to your end user, and your end user can double-click this file, and the browser will automatically be launched, and the application will open into the browser. It also supports TD theming, so I'll be able to use Luna Blue or other themes that I already know from the existing Team Developer IDE. Same support for editing XAML as for WPF Desktop. You can run and debug from the IDE, or, as I mentioned before, you can just load your XBAP file into the browser. All required files for application automatically downloaded by the browser. So like I said before, your end user can open this XBAP file, and all will be taken care and downloaded by the browser when it's running, when it's launching. We have the new runtime data service functionality that I mentioned before. So with this new functionality, there's no need to install database drivers on the browse client machines. Again, everything's going to be downloaded by the server when it needs the information. So if you deploy your application using the browser to several users and you don't want to have the hassle to install database drivers for them, this is the technology that you want to use, because it's going to be automatically downloaded by the browser using our new runtime data service functionality. So let's go ahead. We'll go back to Team Developer 6. This is our last demo for today. And without changing anything on the application, I'm going to go ahead into my project build settings and switch to target type .NET WPF browser. And I'm also going to make it select the Obsidian theme for this application. I'll click OK, and I'll compile by pressing F7. So it's compiling using the IL compiler now. As you can see, it already opened Internet Explorer, and it's launching my XBAP application into this browser. And in a few seconds, it will show the application. As you can see, it looks exactly the same as the WPF desktop. It looks exactly the same as a Team Developer 5.2 application, but now running from your browser. It's connecting to the database, it's connecting to SQL base using the new data service runtime functionality. I have my menu bar that I can navigate through my different menu options. It has the images. As you can see, it also has the zoom functionality, even though I'm using the browser. It has my grid using the push button style for the cell type. If I click here, I'm running actually an MDI application into the browser. So again, exactly like before, but running from Internet Explorer now. So exactly the same functionality. You can see the change that I did before using the XAML editor, changing the push button background color, so showing that the same functionality in the desktop is also now available from the browser as well, using my calendar controls, etc. And now using the Obsidian theme that I chose when I was compiling this application. Okay, so let me close this. We can go ahead and finish the PowerPoint presentation. Another method of compiling applications into Team Developer 6.0 is compiling to .NET class library. We're going to have a webinar on this in the near future, demonstrating the new Team Developer functionality for producing .NET libraries, DLLs, by selecting the .NET class library build target. The output for this type of compilation is a .NET DLL file. So again, pure .NET DLL code generated. So again, Team Developer will provide you a way of sharing code that you create using SOL language, but compile into .NET DLL so you can share this DLL with other applications that also use .NET. So now we are fully integrating Team Developer into the .NET board, and you can share those DLLs, those .NET class library generated from TD, with any other development tool or application that understands and uses the .NET framework. And the last method, I just wanted to give you an overview. Again, we're going to have specific webinars on those topics, is the ability to compile to .NET Web Service. So in Team Developer 5.2, you can consume web services. In Team Developer 6.0, you're going to be able to consume and also generate a .NET Web Service by changing the target build option into your build settings dialog to .NET Web Service. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a functional class based on a new SOL class type called Web Service, and it's only available when the target build is Web Service. So again, you're going to code using the SOL language that you all know. In the time that you choose to compile and build that application, you're going to select the .NET Web Service, and we're going to create a functional class based on this web service for you. So again, you can share this .NET Web Service with other applications that understand the .NET framework and use and consume this web service created from TD from those other applications as well. So we talked about all the code that we can generate from TD. So this is exporting SOL language in a way to the .NET world. In this case here, the second method that we mentioned before when you were talking about Team Developer 6.0 is not only export your application code as .NET, but also import .NET code into Team Developer 6.0. So it's two ways, generating .NET and also reading .NET into TD. So from Team Developer 6.0, there's a brand new way, new way from Team Developer 6, the ability to call non-GUI .NET assemblies from within your SOL code. The approach that we're going to take for doing this is similar to our current wizards for ActiveX and web services. We're going to have a new wizard called .NET Explorer, and this new wizard will allow the developer to select an assembly to call from the SOL language. So I have a few screenshots here just to make it a little bit clearer. Again, we're going to talk about this in future webinars specific to this topic. So the .NET Explorer is a wizard that will allow the developer to select an assembly. So you have .NET assemblies into your machine. This wizard is going to read this into our .NET Explorer. You're going to select the assembly name, click Next. It's going to show you all classes for this assembly. You're going to be able to select one or more of these classes, click Next, and we are going to generate functional classes based on that information for you. So at this point, you called a .NET assembly from Team Developer, and it's now Sol code the same way as you understand using functional classes, methods, our own types, etc. So this is how we're going to allow you to integrate .NET assemblies into Team Developer. We're going to provide a wizard for you which will generate Sol code based on that assembly. And to finish this presentation, talking a little bit about debugger, I mentioned before that we have a new debugger, but it's, again, totally integrated into the Team Developer IDE. So if a .NET build target is selected, the new .NET debugger engine is automatically launched. Most features of existing Win32 debugger will be supported, and we are going to allow step into over and out, set breakpoints, examine variable values, and evaluate expressions exactly like we do now for the Win32 standard native TD world. So just to give you a summary and finish this Team Developer presentation, as you could see, now you can join the .NET family by compiling directly to .NET or calling .NET from native Sol applications. You can create web services. You can create WPF browser applications. You can customize your XAML and make your application user interface look exactly like you want, very modern, very beautiful, and keep the language, our loved Sol language, in our IDE, as you know now, as it's all integrated into the same environment.
All right, great. Well, that brings us, the way you do that is use the question mark button, or the button with the question mark on your WebEx toolbar. We'll go silent for just a few moments here, and we'll come back on and start reading through the questions and answering them. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to just scroll to the top of the questions here. So the first question, actually this came across while Anna was presenting. Can you show the .NET browser option executable? And actually I think she did that there when she went into the XBAP option for the browser. So if there is an additional question on that, let us know. Next question, actually it's a two-part. First part, is Visual Studio required for .NET compilation? And
no, it's not.
Answer is no. And what is required to deploy .NET applications relative to deployment of native Team Developer deployment?
To native the native is exactly the same as before. So if you're talking about when you compile into Win32 executable, for instance, you're going to need exactly the same runtime that you needed with Team Developer up to 5.2. Now, if you're talking about the .NET compilation options, that will depend on what you choose to deploy into. So we're going to have a series of webinars because it's going to depend. For instance, if you choose to deploy to WPF desktop, you're going to need a certain files. If you choose to deploy WPF browser, different set of files. And we're going to provide into Team Developer a way to set up this deployment. So we're going to have a way for you to create an MSI file. If you're choosing WPF desktop, we're going to allow you to deploy and launch your browser deployment files from TD. We're going to allow you to create a package from Team Developer. So it will depend. But for Team Developer Native, it's exactly the same runtime as before.
And I just want to add on to that to emphasize something here. You know, today's webinar, we're talking about all these .NET capabilities, but not everyone is going to want to deploy into .NET. And you will be able to deploy with TD6 into Win32 like you always have if you're not ready to go to .NET or if your business isn't taking you to .NET. So that is going to be the standard basic option that you can upgrade or continue on with on GLS. Next question. Will TD6 support Sybase 15.3, or should we call it SAP 15.3 for based on the recent acquisition of Sybase by SAP?
I believe so, yes. We are certifying, as I mentioned during the presentation, Oracle SQL Base and SQL Server for the initial beta program. I'm sure we will certify Sybase. I wouldn't be able to tell a date yet, but yes, Sybase is one of the main players and we'll continue to support it.
Great. Next question, when will TD6 be available? So the general availability is targeted towards the end of the calendar year, probably the November time frame, but a lot of that will depend on how the alpha and beta goes over the summer. So we are going to be doing with select customers an alpha program starting later this summer, probably towards the end of June, and then probably more towards mid-August or so, or end of August, we'll be doing a beta program as well. If you're interested in those programs, get in touch with your Unify representative and they can go over with you what the requirements are. I will say this, if you want to participate in those programs, a couple things you should keep in mind. You should have your application up to 5.x so that you don't have to go through the Unicode pieces. That way you can have those steps already taken care of and just focus on the 6.0 capabilities. That's what we're going to be looking for during those test phases of 6.0. The other thing you should notice from this demo today is Anna Paula was demoing pieces of TD6. I mean, it is come quite a far, a long way. So as you can see, it's getting there. Next question: is it possible to configure the target type when using command line compilation?
Very good question. Not as of now, but it's a good point because we do have command line compilation for the native. So I'm going to bring that up with the development team, but not as of now.
Okay. Next question. After the TD6 application is compiled to .NET, can it be opened using Visual Studio?
Absolutely. If you're compiling to a .NET class library, you are going to be able, it's pure .NET, so you're going to be able to open it from Visual Studio. Actually, when we do the webinar on the other compilation options, we will be able to demo that.
Great. Will the TD browser come with the TD6 package?
Will the TD browser?
So we weren't showing the browser that you were seeing the Team Developer example in.
It's
was
Internet Explorer.
Internet Explorer. Yeah. So we're not going to be bundling Explorer in with TD6. I mean, this is deploying out in a typical .NET environment.
Yes.
All right, next question. Can the .NET WPF browser exe be deployed in some server, and then can the clients access via browser using some specific URL?
Yes. Yes, and in this case, I believe you were talking about using an application server to deploy your browser application. You can use IIS, for instance, Internet Information Server, to do that, and your clients will just download the applications from this application server.
Great. How are connections handled with the browser application? One single SQL.ini for everybody on the server?
Good question, too. I believe it depends on how you are deploying your application. It makes... The database router connectivity is under work. So let me get back to you. If Matt's taking note of your name, and we'll get back to you on that. I don't have the answer right now because it's under works, but we will confirm and send you an email back. Does that sound right? Do we have his email address?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. 1 second. I'm just making sure I'm making note of it.
And I'm pretty much sure if you're deploying from an application server to several clients, there's going to be a SQLini on the server that you can read the information from, but we'll confirm that.
Okay. Next question. Can any of you briefly mention some of the real-world benefits of compiling applications into .NET code? Well, I guess I would start with in terms of the real-world benefits. If your company is consolidating onto .NET as their platform for development and deployment, then it's going to be a real-world benefit for you to be able to have the product development productivity of team developer and be able to deploy into that environment that your organization's consolidating its technology platform to. The other thing that I would mention, one of the things that everybody on here should take note of, those that have been working in the .NET environment should notice already the fact that what Anna Paula showed today and what she's showing in the architecture is the ability to develop once and at deployment time choose any of these .NET targets, if you will, for deployment. And if you have developed in Visual Studio already in VB.NET or C# or whatever, you know that in those environments, you have to, at development time, decide which of those targets you're going to deploy to and incorporate that into your development. If you decide afterwards that you want to go to some of those other targets, there is some redevelopment effort involved. With Team Developer here, there is none of that. This is a real advantage. In addition to the fact that those of you that have used those more low-level coding approaches know the productivity of Team Developer for your business applications, for building business applications, is huge. And now you're going to be able to compile and deploy those in native .NET.
Yeah, I would add to that the ability to integrate your Team Developer application with other applications in the .NET world. Most of our customers and many of our software developers, they compete trying to sell their application into companies that are .NET oriented. So this is a real case scenario where they would need to have the ability to stay and sell that application as a .NET application as well.
Yeah, and all of that being said, though, there are going to be many of you where there isn't going to be a benefit going to .NET in the short term. And the great news with that, with Team Developer 6, is you don't have to go to .NET. You can continue along your Win32 or client-server path with 6.0. There's a lot of new capabilities in 6.0 that you can take advantage of without going to .NET. You'll be able to continue to do that business as usual. Next question, what is the licensing method for WPF Sabertooth libraries?
There's none. We don't use Sabertooth. We just use the technology behind it because we have the technology in-house. We bought the company that had Sabertooth for this specific reason. So there's no licensing involved. It's just we use the technology behind it, the proven technology, to generate our .NET class libraries.
Right. However, I will add, though, there will be, for those of you that are on Team Developer, if you're going to use the .NET option, there will be, for your development license, an add-on licensing fee if you want to go beyond just the capabilities in the Win32 and want to do the .NET add-on capability from your development environment. There will be an add-on cost. There will be no add-on cost for deployment, though, into the .NET framework. Next question. Can I see .NET source code after compilation?
No, you cannot see you can see the output, but you cannot see the source code, no.
Okay, next question. Can I compile an application in Team Developer 6.0 that uses DDE?
No. You are going to receive warning messages if you are compiling to Win32, but if you're compiling to .NET, it doesn't understand that at all, because Microsoft doesn't support DDE also anymore.
Next question. Our application makes use of sal compile and evaluate. So he's listing an actual sal command here, sal compile and evaluate. Am I right to assume that this will need to be removed prior to migrating to TD6?
No. I think what we need to make very clear here, guys, is that Team Developer 6.0, if you're choosing to use the Win32 options that exist nowadays, everything is supported, everything is exactly the same. It's only if you choose to compile to one of the .NET options that you will need to review your code for certain functions that are not supported anymore. For instance, dynalibs. If you choose to compile to Win32, dynalibs still exists, still supported, everything the same. If you choose to compile to .NET WPF, it doesn't understand dynalib. Dynalib is a TD thing. It doesn't exist in the .NET world. So that's different. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is the option that you choose to compile to? And if it's Win32, everything's the same. Nothing changes.
Next question. If we use WPF browser option, does it mean that it does not require any database drivers installed in the machine from which the browser will be launched?
Correct. Correct. Our data runtime service will take care of that.
Next question. Are table windows supported in .NET?
Yes. Yes. Table windows will run in .NET. We do recommend migrating to the grid because it's the object that we're going to implement new features at, though. But it's still supported.
Next question. How are report builder reports dealt with in the new ActiveX environment? Is there a non-ActiveX alternative being considered so administrator-like privileges are not required for deployment?
I don't have the answer to that. Is there a non-ActiveX alternative being considered? Not as far as I know. We will need to confirm that, Matt. Okay.
Next question. Will the .NET option be of benefit to my .NET developers? Well, that depends. Certainly, if you remember Anna Paula talking about the ability to generate .NET assemblies from your TD application, as well as consume .NET assemblies. She mentioned non-GUI, although I think we're adding some GUI consumption capability as well now, aren't we?
For what? Sorry.
For TD6, are we adding the ability to consume some GUI .NET assemblies or no?
No, for now, no GUI.
Okay. So anyway, there's certainly the ability to generate .NET assemblies that your .NET developers can leverage in their work is one, as well as the ability to consume in your TD applications the .NET assemblies your .NET developers are doing as well. In terms of beyond that, is this something that your current .NET developers can use? Absolutely. I will say this, some .NET developers like doing low-level coding, and they will probably never embrace a 4GL type approach that Team Developer has. Others, though, that are looking for a way to do less low-level coding and be more productive in terms of delivering business applications, this whole idea of the Team Developer environment being able to deploy native .NET applications will be very attractive to that type of developer that's developing in .NET today.
Web services.
So next question, do you provide follow-up webinars to go deeper into the connectivity stuff? We absolutely can and will. In fact, I'll touch on that as when we wrap up the webinar here. We've got a lot of questions. I'm not sure if we're running out of time. We're just going to go through one or two more here, and then we'll wrap it up. Next question. Will Team Developer 6 support 64-bit versions of Windows as a development platform?
Yes, and we already do it 5.2. 5.2 is certified to run on Windows 7 64 and 32-bit. Yep.
Okay, next question. If we have C++ DLLs that reference SAL functions from the, oh my goodness.
Yes.
CBI 32.dll, do those DLLs work when running in the managed .NET environment?
No, this is the TD, I believe you're talking about the TD runtime, CDLLI DLLs. Those are specific to the TD native.
Yep. Next question is kind of a follow-on on the Sabretooth libraries. It says, but a few years ago, Sabretooth didn't support migrating SAL compile and evaluate to the .NET world. So just to, and we're going to wrap up on this question, just to clarify, this is not Sabretooth. So Sabretooth is a product that we have for migrating applications to .NET. And we acquired that technology for actually three primary reasons. One of them was to be able to accelerate delivering a Team Developer 6 that lets you deploy into native .NET. What you're seeing today is Team Developer 6 deploying into native .NET. It is not the Sabretooth solution. That Sabretooth solution is still available for those that can't wait for Team Developer 6. But given that Team Developer 6 is out later this year, be interested to hear why you couldn't wait for this. But this is not Sabretooth that you're looking at.
And just to finish here really quick, I did not say that we will support that function in the .NET. What I said is if you're looking for TD60 using Win32 native, that's totally supported, independent if you're using TD60 or not. So it is supported. I didn't say that we will support in the .NET. What I said is that you'll be able to compile an application using TD60 that uses that function if you're choosing to deploy into Win32.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We want to thank everyone for participating in the webinar today. We hope you found it useful and of value. When you exit out, you're going to get a survey. Please take 1 minute. Let us know how we did. What did you like? What didn't you like? Was it what you expected? And along the lines of that connectivity stuff question, let us know what topics you would like to see next. In particular, with this TD6 and all these different .NET target types, there are a lot of different webinars that we're planning to do, but we'd like to know specifically what you'd like to see and in what priority as well. So based on your feedback, it will really help us decide which topics we need to go into next for you. So take a moment on the survey and let us know that. We do these webinars monthly. You will get an invite to the next one, which will be towards the end of June. I don't have the exact date off the top of my head, but it'll be the third or fourth week of June. And we'll send out the invite typically a week before. Other than that, you know, I don't know if the summary slide is still up, but a couple things that you should take away from this is that we are offering deployment into several .NET targets as an option, but you can still stay on Win32 if you want. But these are native .NET deployments without having to do any redevelopment, which is not offered by anybody else on the market. Anybody else that's offering .NET deployment, you're having to do some extra work at development time to choose your target. The other thing is you saw the XAML editor, and we're including XAML, and I just had to mention that because I love the name of that, XAML. But there is the ability, as you saw, I guess the more important point there is Anna was actually demoing portions of this product. As you can see, this product is real. It is coming. So be thinking about how you can prepare for it and how you can get ready for it. If you're interested in the alpha and beta programs, let your Unify representative know. But if you really want to participate in those programs, you need to be thinking about how you can be Unicode enabled and migrate now into the 5.x. And then the last thing is, this is really, think about how this is giving you the productivity of the team developer environment for developing business applications, but deploying into native .NET different targets in the .NET framework. We're going to leave you with that, and we look forward to seeing you on the future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.